Welcoming you to the ANTN March Speaker Series conversation with Reverend Kathy Young and Reverend Ellie Benjamin. So we allow ourselves to be comfortable, to be relaxed, to be in the peace and the quiet of this moment, reminding ourselves that there is only one power, presence, mind, life, and intelligence, and that is God. Spirit, the universe, the infinite, the divine, whatever we choose to call it. And we come together in gratitude today for the opportunity to go apart a while, to be reminded of the truth of who we are, to be open at the top, as Ernest Holmes said. We're so grateful for this organization and this opportunity, honoring the new vision statement of ANTN, which is connecting the New Thought movement through consciousness and love. And we're so grateful for the different organizations within New Thought, recognizing that even though we might call ourselves something different, we really do speak the same language. So we give thanks for this connection, for this opportunity, for the wisdom to be shared and received today. So I wrap our time together in gratitude, love, and light, and together we say, and so it is.
Yes, so it is.
So it is.
So it is my great pleasure to introduce Reverend Ellie Benjamin. She is the Vice President of the ANTN Board and our Speaker Series Coordinator. Good morning, Reverend Ellie.
Good morning, Reverend Jerry. So good to be here today with so many of our friends. And for those of you that are watching the replay, so glad that you found us. Today, I am just so thrilled to introduce a very dear friend of mine. I can see that I've frozen a little bit, so I'm going to. Okay, so I'm very happy to introduce a very, very dear friend of mine, Reverend Kathy Young. And so I'm going to turn things over to you, Kathy. I know that our community is so excited to connect with you, to get to know you, and to hear all the wonderful things that you have to share with us today. We have been friends for several years. We met at the Big Sky Retreat, and we currently serve on that board of directors together. So, Kathy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I've heard so much about ANTN and have not had an opportunity to participate in anything. And so when Allie asked me to come today, I jumped at the chance. Reverend Dr. Jerry asked me to begin with a little bit about my ministry and about the CSL Focus Ministry program. So I'm going to start there and then we'll dive into the topic. So I am the founder and the spiritual director of Intention Wise, which is a CSL Focus Ministry. And what we do is we take consciousness principles out into the world, into the workplace through a leadership lens. So I work with leaders of all different kinds of organizations, and I work with leaders. Intention Wise itself, the work it focuses on mostly is working with spiritual centers and other related things, not necessarily just centers, but like chaplaincies and programs where people are wanting to bring spirit to work and things along that line. It's a much more overt, spiritually focused and discussing, the language is very, you guys would all recognize it. We could be in church, we could be in an office. That's kind of how it plays out when we work with those groups. But we also have a wing that focuses on all kinds of companies. And we do a lot of work in the world with the executive teams of large financial corporations and major first responder groups and hospitals and things like that. So, and there we are speaking spirit in a different way. We're speaking their language as we would if we went out and started a work in somewhere in Africa. We would do our best to use their language and their customs and all of that. And so we consider the workplace to be an outreach zone for us. And so we go in and we speak their language and we put things in everyday language. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. We don't have time to go into a lot of it, but it actually is a way to serve differently. And I'm pretty sure that spirit is not confused by the words we use. So that's what I know about that. So that's what we do with that. So you may hear me forget to use people's titles today, and that's because the majority of my time when I'm doing this kind of work, I am not in an environment where we're using titles. So if I just all of a sudden say, hey, Jerry, I'm not being disrespectful. I'm just old and forgetful. So you'll have to just work with that. So I love the fact that I get to take this work into the world. Intention wise is, I said, a CSL focused ministry. So we're under the Centers for Spiritual Living 501c3 umbrella. We're considered a center. Even though we don't have any members, it's a different way of being. And there are a number of ministries in CSL, and it's a growing group that are focus ministries. And the focus of the focus ministries is to, we're all intent on taking this teaching and these teachings and these principles out into daily life, into the world in a variety of ways. And so most are not necessarily directly attached to a center, but we all belong to centers. And we also tithe to the organization, and we follow the same rules that centers have to follow in terms of affiliation and all those different kinds of pieces, keeping licenses and all the legalities in place. But the uniqueness of the ability to take it in a very different lens is really powerful, because a number of people are just turned off by church experiences, or they don't have the time. A lot of the people I work with spend so much time at work, they don't have the time on the weekend to go join into a community like that. Their community is their workplace. And so we can bring what we have to them. And I will tell you what I am finding increasingly, I've been doing this now, this particular work this way as a licensed minister for almost 9 years. And what I am finding is an increasing awareness and an increasing desire for deep meaning and purpose and the stuff that we teach. Clarity on who I am, how do I find decisions on my own, what's happening out here isn't serving me. So I think this is a really powerful program that CSL has in place. I'm really grateful for it. And more importantly, I think it's provided a lot of models of ways that we can serve differently as we're having to adapt to changing times and to changing conditions and constrained by certain conditions. So we can take a look at how we serve, and how we've served in the past certainly informs us and builds skills, but how we're going to serve in the future is going to be really different, I think, in many ways. And so that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. So Jerry, does that cover the kind of information you were looking for?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Great, you're welcome. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today really does have to do with this, what's next kind of a thing. I don't know, how many of you have been experiencing change? Things that are different, things you never thought you'd see in your lifetime. Yeah. There's a lot that's been going on. And so I think we're, I know that as New Thought leaders, we're completely called to be part of that transformation. And we're not here by accident at this time. Although I do question myself sometimes. I think when I get back to wherever I came from, I'm going to have a little chat with me about some of this. But we are here on purpose. We are here because we have something to give and to bring. And even though we may not be consciously aware of how to do that in certain situations, we know that it's ours to do, whatever that looks like. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So with this much change that's been going on, it's really easy to think that we're supposed to play the part that we're practiced. We're skilled, we've got experience, we've been doing this for years, we have depth, we have all kinds of knowledge and intuitive awareness that helps us navigate. And we know the framework in which we work. There hasn't been a huge, major shift quite like we've seen recently in the last 20, 30 years. But what we're finding is that the way that we may have been practiced and skilled and developed and taught and really developed crazy expertise in is not exactly on point anymore. It's not quite as resonant and relevant with the people that we know that we're here to serve. And so we need to really think into that a little bit differently. So we know, every single one of us here in the room knows that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. That's not new news for us. You'd be amazed at for how many people that is brand new thought, but it's not news for us. But in the past year, for most of us, or many of us, the human side of our experience is the one that's been acutely amplified, right? You know, it's just like, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, I'm not happy, I'm confused, there's a lot going on, I'm not sure what to think about. Things that used to work don't seem to be working right now. Things that used to make sense don't seem to quite make sense. My brain is trying to make sense out of things that I don't get. It just doesn't feel right. And that's not uncommon. None of us are crazy. It's part of the conditions that we've been in. It's part of the experience that the global community has been in, and certainly the Western community, and very much so here in the United States, for those of you who are from the US. So the reason for that, I just want to dive into a little bit about what's been going on there, what's contributing to that. So our brain is wired to think in patterns. That's how the brain is. There's way too much information coming in for us to process it. So the brain thinks in patterns. We develop neural pathways. Those neural pathways help us run on a bit of an autopilot. And our brain learns from us the things that were important to us and creates these pathways. But unless we revisit them, they keep running. So what may have been super important to me when I was 19 may still be running. And I may not know it because it feels like me. It's just the way I am. And so we've got what's called a RAS, or a reticular activation system in the brain. It's a little cluster of cells that sits at the brainstem. And what it does is a number of things. It handles like our temperature and circulation, things like that. But one of the key things it does that matters in this conversation is it manages habituation. So what becomes a habit, and how do those habits run, and when do they get turned on? So anytime we encounter something that feels familiar, that part of the brain goes, I know how to do this. And we run a pattern that we've been running forever. And we may or may not know that we're running the pattern because we're using the current content. So it feels like it's a new thought, it's a new idea, it's a new thing. But if we were to deconstruct it and go a little deeper, we would actually find that this is a pattern that we've been using for a long time. That serves really well on things that are not necessary for us to have to remember, like brushing our teeth, or eating at a certain time, drinking water, those kinds of things, paying our bills, just stuff where we have habits in place that serve us. That's great. But when the conditions change dramatically, we have to rethink all that, because now the pattern was designed for one set of conditions, and those conditions, when they're dramatically shifted like they have been recently, don't apply anymore. So the research has been showing for over 20 years that the pace and complexity of work, commerce, life in the Western world particularly, is increasing dramatically, both the pace and the complexity. This is due in large part to just the globalization of things. It's also due to the technology and our ability to understand even more and more things, or get access to things that before, we would have to take more time, or it doesn't cost as much to make long distance calls as it used to. Or now we can be like this, we can be virtually present. And I can remember way long time ago, Disneyland had this display. My dad was a television writer, and so we got Disney passes when I was a kid, and we got to go, they closed the park for the Writers Guild and all this kind of stuff. And my favorite place to go was where they had these really crazy things where you could see the people on the telephone. And it was just like magic. And it was this, that and the Jetsons. I always liked the Jetsons. In fact, I want what Jane Jetson had. I want that little thing of myself that's all dressed up, so that when I want to have to take a call, I don't have to get dressed up. I could just be in front of it and be in my jammies right behind. So, but all of this kind of thing has just in my lifetime has sped up so quickly that this is normal. Not only normal, most businesses are having to use it to function. And I was on a call yesterday with people that were from 7 countries, all in real time. So then it starts to challenge our notion of time. And it's helping me help people in the secular world and in business understand that the only time there is really real is now. Because while you're all in different time zones, I'm sure, than I am, we're all here now. So what does that mean? And how do we start to build work teams around that awareness and things like that. So it's kind of a fun thing to do. So this pace and complexity of work has been increasing dramatically, and that's without a global pandemic, without all the heightened civil and political unrest we've been experiencing over the last year, and without local, national, and economic challenges across the world. That's been happening without all those things. So now let's add those things, just because there's not enough going on. Let's add those things. So our human instinct is to do what we've always done, only do more of it and do it faster, or start cutting things. Well, we're just not going to do this anymore because there's no time, without necessarily thinking into, should we actually be expanding that and cutting something else? Human nature, to keep us safe, our human nature is to manage it. Let's manage this rush and everything else. And so we're going to try and do more. We're going to try and do it faster. That's just the way it works. And the brain is creating all of our options from the knowledge we have in our conscious mind, many of which are in our patterns and their habits. And we're not even aware how much they're informing our thinking. All of that's limited because it's what we already know. I got the opportunity a long time ago to do an interview for Science Mind magazine with Amit Goswami. And in our conversation, we were talking about how you can't logic your way into a quantum leap. And he said it really well when he said, the edges of your imagination is the edges of your current consciousness. And a quantum leap requires you go well beyond your current consciousness. So as soon as we think that we're thinking into the best decisions, we've just put a limit on it. And that really has sat with me for all these years, that's true. Research also shows that reacting that way just on a human level is not sustainable. It's not effective either. And so we can't really count on those instincts. Well, then if we add the amplified conditions that we've been experiencing, and we call this is what's called a VUCA environment, and VUCA is an acronym. The V stands for volatility. That's things blowing up and changing and dramatically shifting. And think of a volcano, right? It's that kind of volatility. The U is uncertainty. We can't tell where the beginning, middle, and end is, who's in charge, what we're really supposed to be doing. The C stands for complexity. So lots of moving pieces, sometimes things that are coming out as absolute truth and they're totally opposite. I mean, just think about at the beginning of the pandemic, what we were being told to do, not to do, what to do, all you had to do was listen to 2 or 3 different news channels within an hour and you'd get conflicting reports, because we're trying to learn and figure it out and solve it all at the same time. All those things are happening. And there's all this complexity and we don't know where things started or what, if we do this, is it going to impact this? It's just very hard to track that. And then there's the ambiguity, which feels kind of like we're moving through fog. Can't see very far in front of us. There's not real clarity. It's just kind of muddy. We kind of how do we plan? Are we doing Easter services? Yeah, maybe. Right? That ambiguity is part of it as well. Well, we have been in these amplified VUCA conditions globally for the last year. And many of these are at play anyway, in company mergers, in a church mergers, in a founding of a church, in change in leadership. We see some of these conditions come in, but the level and the intensity with which they've been present and the time, the interminability. I don't know about you guys, but frequently I'm thinking, oh dear Lord, really could recess come any moment? I'm ready for a break. That all has an effect. So just want to stop here for a second and have you put in the chat, just what would you say are the biggest challenges that you're facing right now, or changes, but I want to hold them as a little bit of challenge that they feel like challenges that you're facing in your ministry, your area of service, your life. What's going on in your world that's different than it was this time 2 years ago? So John is ready for recess. He wants downtime on the beach. Allie's dealing with mobile ministry. Abigail, babysitting granddaughters. I have more grandkid care going on too. Steve, yeah, constant negativity. Oh, a new romantic relationship. I want that. Health issues, so many things to accomplish, so many time, so little time, finding a new space to meet when we go back, change of direction in ministry, a deepening. These things can be good. They can also be perceived as bad. They're just neutral till we judge them, right? So wanting to travel soon, factoring in more time with grandkids. Yeah. Yeah, we've all got things that are going on that are not small changes and not small questions, right? And so we want to learn how to adapt more effectively than just trying to do more or being paralyzed by the challenge. When VUCA is operating the way it's operating, the way it's been, and as long as it's going on, our nervous system is affected. The human body is designed in such a way that we are scanning constantly for danger. That's a part of the limbic brain. We are designed for survival. So we're scanning for danger. And unfortunately, that system is a little outdated and is probably not going to be updated in our lifetime. But what happens is it's fueled by the same energy that fuels the fight, flight, freeze mechanism gets involved when we get anxious. And that's fueled by the same energy that fuels our executive thinking. Our most complex ability to think is fueled by that same energy. So what that means, if you picture a balloon full of water, and like one of those balloons you can make a dog out of, it's full of water, and you can tilt it a little bit, and it's got, it's not totally full, we got some room. If I ramp up my emotional self and I'm getting anxious, my executive functionality drops. And if I instead ramp up my executive functionality by asking my brain open-ended questions and doing other things that stimulate the part of the brain where that lives, my anxiety begins to drop. So learning to manage the biological impact is important if we want to learn to think differently. And I can give you a couple of really quick tools for this. You probably all know them, but I'll tell you how they link if you're interested into the biology. If you will, breathing is the first step. So you want to breathe in through your nose slowly, but not so slowly that you then end up gasping, like reasonably slowly. And when we're stressed, sometimes we're breathing from like right here and we're breathing fast. So in through the nose and then out through the mouth at the velocity that you could breathe out through a straw. You don't have to go, like this for those of us who don't want those little lines, but you can just in through the nose, out through the mouth. Let's just do that a couple of times. In through the nose. Breathe real deep down into way down into your torso, and out through the mouth. One more. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Can you feel the biological difference? Feel a little bit of center. Your blood pressure drops. I actually had the opportunity to watch my blood pressure drop when I was running for a plane one time. And I don't have time to go into the whole horrible story, but it was a very long, horrible story. And I was running for the fourth time to the other end of the complex because they kept changing our gate, and leaned against a wall because I was just over it, and happened to look at my watch to see what time it was, and the heart thing was up. And my heart rate was not healthy. So I did 3 rounds of this breathing and watched it drop way down in just a matter of 3 rounds, which took less than a minute and a half. So what's happening here? Well, the Harvard School of Mind-Body Medicine tells us that what's happening here is that when we breathe through our nose, we are sending a signal to the nervous system that we're safe. Think about it. When you're panicked, or when you're trying to run, or when something's happening, you're mouth breathing, because we're gulping oxygen. We think we're gulping oxygen. It's not that effective, but that's what we do. We go to mouth breathing. All the energy is going into our large muscle groups so that we can get away. But when we're anxious, we're having that same response, even though we're not running anywhere. So we need to help that energy move back into the areas where we need it. So the first step is that breathing. The second step is to ask yourself an open-ended question. So this is not a yes/no question, and nothing that your patterned self can respond to. So this might be, what do I need? Or what is my next best step? Or in this moment, how do I feel? Anything that has that open-ended question. I find what do I need to be a really easy one for people to grasp hold of, because it's short and it's not hard to make that a habit. to ask that question. What that does is it begins to fire that brain, right? So now we've got the emotional self is all wide open, and this is down here. The breathing is starting to diminish the emotional self and starting to open this. We ask open-ended questions and we begin to get this part of the brain activated on open-ended questions, and this relaxes. Now, you may not feel the change quite so quickly, but biologically it's happening, and that's what we need in order to get the brain activated again. So those are the best two tools. The good news is, for those of you who work with others, you can teach anybody this in the time I just taught it to you. It is so easy. It's non-threatening. I have executive teams that will go, we need to stop and breathe. And they do. And because it works. And when you bring it and link it to biology and science, people who are not necessarily engaged or have a strong spiritual base can follow you. And it's still the same thing. What we're doing is centering. What we're doing is reminding ourselves who we are. What we're doing is sending back in. That's what's happening at the deeper level. But at our physical and conscious thought level, we're scientifically choosing to slow down. So everything we've just talked about up until this point has to do with awareness, right? So we have to raise awareness to where we are before we can make any kind of a change. It's the first step in any awareness. The second, in any change. The second step is acceptance. We can't just know that this is all happening. We have to choose to accept. So like I said, our first impulse is to try and do more to overcome it. What we're really trying to do is eliminate the discomfort. We're trying to eliminate the uncertainty. We're trying to understand the ambiguity. We're trying to solve the complexity, whatever it is, we're trying to manage it. And that's, again, it's part of our way we're wired. That's not surprising. Our human nature is to stay safe. We have been trained and conditioned our whole lives that this is the center for that. And it's not. We know that. We know that better, right? But we'll go there because under stress, we all default to our strongest preferences and our oldest habits. That means that things that got conditioned way back are the things that start running, because we're just too stressed and we're trying to use our brain to think about other stuff. So our first impulse for coping is to eliminate it, but we can't really do that. What that actually does is it adds additional stress to the nervous system, because there's a part of us that knows this is going to happen, not going to work. And then, we're in that loop with the best thinking not being available. So we have got to be aware that we're not at our best. And then we have to go into the second step, which is acceptance. We have to accept it. We just have to be with it. We have to accept with what is, and then ask, now what? Not what we wish was. We can let ourselves know that we have those feelings. It's not about slamming our emotional self into a closet and shutting the door, but it is about not letting it drive the bus. And so we have to be clearer and allow ourselves to say, okay, this is what it is, and I can't do anything about the conditions at this moment, so now what? And that requires that we start to think about counterintuitive actions and counterintuitive thoughts, things that don't feel right. Benjamin Zander, who was I don't know if he still is, but he was the conductor for the Boston Philharmonic. He and his wife did a book called The Art of Possibility, like decades ago. Excellent book. He tells a story in one of his YouTube talks about his father was in an internment camp in England when they migrated from Germany during World War II. And they had lost a lot of the family in Auschwitz, and they were relocating. They were put in this internment camp. It was just like all the internment camps we've heard about. Everybody, families are separated. They have to be quarantined. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to be allowed in, all that kind of thing. So lots of VUCA happening for these people, lots of VUCA and pain and grief on top of it. His father, when he got in there, looked around and said, there's a lot of smart people in here. We should start a university. And so they did. He opened up a university. People taught, no books, no pens, no paper, taught from what they knew. They'd sit in groups and they would teach the topic that they knew. So people were developing, growing, connecting, engaging. They ran nearly 100 classes. And the people who engaged left that situation more equipped and better and stronger and different than when they went in. There were a number of people who chose not to engage. They instead chose to sit along the fence and and just sit and stare, and B, they were so depressed they couldn't move, and there was no help in there for them. So, but some of them were making choices because they were so angry that they were separated. So my point is, we have the choice. And when we're faced with these kinds of things, we get to choose how we want to show up. There's opportunity in every single challenge, but we have to look for it, and then we have to make a choice to engage differently. And that requires that we think differently. You know, it's wisdom to look at uncertainty as a great pause or an opportunity, kind of a staging area for the next phase of our life or our expression that's wanting to emerge. We can't do that at high speed. We have to slow down in order for those things to begin to take place. And when we're forced to slow down, if we'll take that and put that as our mindset, that can be super useful. Price Pritchett says that this kind of a time is a gift whose treasure will be defined by how we choose to participate in the new unfolding of the world and ourselves. And so our first step here is to manage ourselves and not try to manage the conditions. So our natural instincts, what we've already talked about, aren't going to provide us good guidance. What feels right or good is often our paradigm trying to keep us safe or move us back into something that feels comfortable. We as humans will often conflate discomfort with something being wrong, but that isn't really always the case. Think about if you were working in your garden, you're out there, it's a beautiful spring day, you're only going to get these things planted, you know you're tired, you know your back is aching, your legs are getting sore from squatting or whatever, and you're thinking, okay, just one more, I just got one more row to get, and so you get it in, you go in, and then you're relaxing, go to bed that night, wake up in the morning, and you can't get up, can't move, your legs won't work, your back is like, oh, you know, or whatever. And do you call an ambulance? No, we don't call an ambulance when that's happened. Why? Because we know what the cause was. If you woke up in the morning and didn't know what the cause is, you might consider calling an ambulance, right? Both of those things have the same level of pain. It's not the pain. It's not the pain that makes it bad. One's an indicator of use and possible growth. Like if we work out too long, you know, we're growing, we're expanding, we're uncomfortable because of that. The other is something's wrong. So just because sometimes discomfort is wrong doesn't mean it always is, but our default, because we're wired to scan for danger, is to go to something's wrong. So what we have to do is we have to use our brains to override the tendency to want to try and move back into the comfort zone, and instead be willing to be uncomfortable in the service of growth and expansion. That's a choice. So we have to, in order to do things differently, we've got to think differently. And if we're going to think differently, we have to challenge our beliefs. We have to challenge even things that we are certain that we know, because they're all linked together, and beliefs comes first. It's almost like in the Science of Mind teaching symbol, for those of you who are aware of it, in that unconscious, there's first the belief section is there, and then you've got the center section where that's where all the possibility and things like that lie, and when we start to make different decisions, and then you've got the manifestation part where it's coming into form. So you could think of that as your belief, your thought, your action. You know, it's the same kind of a pattern. You know, the universe is complete, right? We see all these things in multiple ways. We are the only species on the planet capable of self-reflection that we know about. We can notice and challenge our thinking about past events. We can notice and challenge our thinking about what's possible in the future. But most importantly, we can learn to notice it and challenge it in the moment. And we can interrupt old patterns by asking questions. Byron Katie's work is really good for this. Is that true? Is it really true? How do I know it's true? Who would I be without that thought? You know, all that kind of thing. And again, I can use that in the work that I do with people in the world who are not steeped and trained like you all are in this teaching. They understand it because they can ask themselves those questions. The deeper part of them is going to respond. They're going to get an answer. And it isn't just going to come from here. There's going to be a niggling that says, yeah, no, that's not true. There's more. We can do this differently. So learning to develop that self-reflection and using it as an active tool in decision-making, in planning, in evaluation, I think that's one of the things that we're all being called to up our game in, is to really get more clear and deeper in our mindfulness, to where we're actually really thinking things into the level below the level below the level, and see what's really underneath that. So, and to do that, we have to activate our inherent mental gifts. You know, we've got a number of mental attributes that come with us when we show up. We're gifted with that. Will, imagine, and curiosity are three of them, and those are really necessary for this process. So we have to really be disciplined and decide we're going to do it whether we feel like it or not. We're going to have to engage our imagination and not go with what's realistic, but what's possible. It's not magical thinking. It's possible I could fly to the moon. Well, maybe, but you know, that you don't really believe that, right? So let's go with the things that we really can have a resonance with. But it's an imagination that goes beyond where we've been. The questions, what if and why not, are really good to play with here. And if you tell your brain that you are playing with these questions, it doesn't get locked into the heaviness of working with these questions. Like if I say, we're going to play with this idea, what happens is your internal judge goes, oh, they're just playing. There's a different energy about it. You can feel it. If I say to you, we're really going to work on this and resolve it, doesn't that feel heavier? It's just got a different vibration to it. And so that language can be important when we're trying to help ourselves cope. I love this quote. This came from a woman named Hazel Henderson in a book called The Politics of the Solar Age. She says, if we can recognize that change and uncertainty are basic principles, we can free ourselves further and understand that the transformation that we're going into is such that we do not know enough to be pessimistic. We don't know enough to be pessimistic. Isn't it interesting? This is another way to see human nature. We always look at go, we don't know enough to trust that. But do we know enough to be pessimistic? I love that. It's the same exact two sides of a coin. So why not choose the one that actually has room in it? Curiosity opens up possibility, even in a disagreement. When we're working with people and teaching them how to handle difficult conversations, getting curious is one of the key steps. Because curiosity says, tell me more. What if? Help me explain. How is that different? All of those different things, and it invites in learning and expansion. Judgment shuts things down. We've decided, we know, and there's no more room for transformation. And so if we can, curiosity and judgment, interestingly, live very close together in the brain. It does not take a lot more energy to move your judgment into curiosity and hang out there. And you can develop that as a habit. My grandmother was that way. She used to make me crazy of all the things she was curious about. Every time, I wonder why that happened. She just was insatiably curious. And now I'm grateful for it because she trained all of us to be that way. And when I learned all this stuff about the brain, I was like, wow, that's super cool. So if we got curious, then we would not be able to be pessimistic, right? So if we play that way and we treat people that way and we help other people learn to be that way, now we can take a look at the needs of the world and see new ways to serve. Now we can take a look at what people really need. I will tell you what I'm seeing people really need is to understand some of what I'm talking about here, a new way to think. We have the tools to help develop that in people in a way that they can get and make it simple without using jargon that will shut the conversation down. I have a course that I teach with executives. I've been teaching this for almost 20 years. It's called gut-based decision-making. Every executive's like in. It's 100% intuition, learning how to hear your gut, understanding that your body has a different resonance when you're feeling constriction. That's probably not your best answer. When you're feeling a slight sense of expansion, it's better. They're meditative practices, but they're not couched that way. But they're all very good at it because it works. And so finding language that isn't limiting and finding language that's everyday and describes how you can help, how this will help them. What is the benefit? Not it's good for you, but wow, are you going to feel better? As soon as you're able to breathe through your nose and out, you're then going to have your executive thinking available to you again, and your ideas will be better. They won't be limited. People are then going, okay, I want to learn how to do that. I want to learn how to do that. So there's a hunger for connection. There's a need to learn how to rethink. There's really a strong need for people to know how to retool, whether they know it or not, because things are not going to go back to what they used to be. Think about the airports. After 9/11, we couldn't wait until we didn't have to go through security all the time and like almost wear our bathrobes so that we could just, show everything. It was like, what's up with this? And now we're still having to go through that kind of security. So there's some things that have shifted that aren't going to go back to whatever normal was. And we don't have a new normal. And what if there is no normal? What if change and transformation is a continual part of life? And what we're being called to do is to think higher and be more locked into what our vision is, what our purpose is, and how are we going to move. Ways that I'm seeing very useful right now for other ways to connect with community and things like this are classes that are built for deep connection and exploration. There's a new program that the John Maxwell team has out. It's free for you to participate in if you chose that you wanted to be a facilitator. You have to go through a very short online training, but it's called Change Your World. It goes with his new book, and it's all about it's small groups getting together and discussing hope and these different values, hope and possibility and forgiveness and just different basic values. But they have worksheets, they have a structure for the group. You can do the structure their way, or you can adapt it slightly for whatever works for you and your teams. And they're practical, but they're deepening. I'm running one of those right now just as an experiment to see how it's going. And people are begging if we can do it again. And they're saying things like, oh my gosh, and none of these people, well, two of these people are in New Thought, the others are not. But they're all leaders. And they're saying things like, oh my God, I didn't think I could set aside an hour and a half every week. And this is like my lifeline. We know that. We've seen people come into classes and do that, but we have to help them do it in a way that's going to work. So right now, doing things online, people need shorter sessions. They need more connection. They need more facilitation than teaching, which certainly I'm not demonstrating at this moment, but they need more facilitation than teaching. And they need ways to explore their own inner world in the context of how they want to be in the world and what they want to bring to contribute. So shorter, practical, more frequent, more facilitated than taught, smaller groups, anything like that. And the topics don't have to be what we would normally consider spiritual topics. They can be things like, how do we help change the world? How do we help families that are single parents? How do we help single parents to find a way to connect and retain their sanity if they're still having to do some homeschooling? All these different pieces, if we start thinking what's practical and do that.
Oops, Reverend Kathy, you froze.
Well, I know that we are learning. I know if you're anything like me, you are writing notes on everything that
instead of what's easy ways to access spiritual experience themselves and learning how to live into that. They had a goal for the year.
But we'll wait for Kathy to come back. I was thinking I'd be the one that would freeze up here in the mountains, but we're taking lots of notes. I'm sure everyone here is drinking in what she's sharing with us as we think about how to expand what we're doing, how do we adjust and take all that we've learned out into our lives and to our families and maybe into our ministries. So hopefully we get Kathy back. John, would you text Kathy for me, please? Thank you.
Just a reminder while we're waiting, give us a couple of days and the recording for today's session will be up on our YouTube channel. I don't know about you, but I definitely want to go back and listen again. The YouTube channel is ANTN, ANTN, ANTN members and friends. And we'll have this morning's sessions as well as prior sessions. Kathy, are you back with us?
She just texted me and said that she is trying to reconnect. She lost internet.
Technology is a wonderful thing.
I'm sure she's implementing all of her strategies here as she attempts to get back online. So if anyone has any questions for Kathy, we have 10 more minutes. I'd love you to type them into the chat. And Jerry, if we have more than a couple, if you could track those and we can pass them along to Kathy afterwards.
Certainly. Yes, be happy to.
Thank you.
I don't know enough to be pessimistic. That is amazing. I love that. I absolutely love that. I'm gonna print that and hang it all over my house. Yes. Yeah. That's just what amazing wisdom. And what else?
Or I'm curious of whether I know enough to be pessimistic.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what questions we have. So how might some of you implement some of these things?
Okay, so Ali froze as well. We're just having way too much fun with our technology. Toward the beginning of the conversation, Reverend Kathy was talking about our patterns and our neural pathways and our habituation. That really resonated for me because I see in so many situations in my life that are completely different than they were before, my reactions continue to be, no, it's supposed to be this way. Because I was in that habit for years or decades or centuries, and it's not that way anymore, but I feel like I keep trying to force how it was on how it is. Sounds like a really good Sunday talk, huh? But
It's
that,
at least a
yeah,
book,
just,
Jerry.
I'm sorry?
It's at least a book.
At least a book, right? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and I can definitely see in so many different areas. No, it's supposed to be this way. No, it's supposed to be this way. No, it's not.
And developing that curiosity will open up new neural pathways. I've worked with many individuals with who suffer brain injury, and to reteach, you have to use the neural pathways. You have to reteach another way. Things that they've already learned once in their life, but after an injury, they have to relearn. So be curious about developing new neural pathways is wonderful. It's even like taking a new way home or trying a new way of doing something. It's brilliant, being curious about that.
Wow.
Welcome,
And there she
Kathy.
is. Okay.
That has never, ever happened to me. I saw all the lights flicker, and so I guess our power went out. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I was going to move us into a discussion. Sounds like you're in it, and so why don't we keep going with what you're doing?
Okay, and then so we'll wait. Maybe we can chat a little bit, prompted by you, and then in the last minute, would you like to close us in prayer?
Sure.
Great.
Do that. We'll bless my system.
And there's a great question. I don't know if you, yes, absolutely. Yes. Internet gods. A great question from John. Curious what kind of language can be used to be more welcoming. And that's a really good point, to those hungry for a new way of thinking, but that don't speak the new thought language.
Right.
Yeah. So John, how do you do that now?
Oh.
Well, I'm mostly what I facilitate in my Course in Miracles groups. We're all speaking the same language and redefining some of the traditional Christian terms as far as the Course. But I when I'm doing my coaching, it's based on A Course in Miracles, but I don't say things like the sonship or God, because that may be triggering for some people. So I do find ways to say about like using the word spirit instead of, or intuition or feeling it. But I love how that class you're talking about with your executives, like, you know, deciding from your gut. Like, so I'm just curious, what other words or what other ways have you found to not dumb it down, but to you know, I love how you shared that about, you know, not using jargon that could turn off people. We want it to be more opening.
Yeah, really, it's about putting it into everyday language. If you think about everyday language, you're going to find other terms for things. And when you feel yourself dipping into what you know, again, this comes back to challenging our beliefs and the way we think. We all know what we mean when we say, I'm going to stand in the light, or I'm going to center up. You know, we get that. I was in a session where somebody else was facilitating. They're also a New Thought person. They're still in the group. And she said, we've created a safe container here. And all these guys are like, what? You did what? What's a good? I don't see any, I don't have a container. You know, I mean, they're just like all confused. That's jargon. It's jargon. And we, as Americans in general, those of us who are from the US, we do that all the time. I mean, you can go to different parts of the country and find different jargon, right? So we have to be careful about that. So if you say it out loud or think it when you're writing it out, I want to notice, is that everyday language? Would somebody who has zero awareness of this be able to track with me? Because our principles and everything we're talking about fits in everyday language. We just have to be aware that it's not working if we're going.
Uh-oh,
Oops.
Yeah. Oopsie. All right, so maybe somebody else has some suggestions for how do you speak to people that aren't within the New Thought movement, that maybe you've had experience with family. Angie,
Going to bring it in, if we're going to bring church language thing, but if you're trying to do classes that are open to anybody, there's a whole lot of jargon that could, we're part of a greater good and we're all one, and you know, all this kind of thing. But I teach oneness all the.
Angie, go ahead and unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Angie.
Good. Okay. What I've used in the past with businesses and people who are not familiar with our belief system, I've used the word energy. It is amazing, and feelings, and to get their attention and to bring them into the segue of it all. Have you ever gone to a place where you felt uncomfortable? So we have a natural inclination to deal with energy, the movement of energy, emotion. And that's what I use when I'm dealing with people who are even in the fundamental Christianity or the business leaders. It's really a joy for us to reach out and start dealing with the businesses. I'm impressed with this lady. She is just amazing. I thank you for bringing her for us. Her magnificence just shines in all that she does. What a blessing. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie. Anyone else have something to say to answer John's question about how do we frame things up a little differently?
Well, I think Abigail and I have a very wonderful advantage because most of our work is done with interfaith. And we're constantly with people who are not New Thought. And we're teaching New Thought principles by speaking everyday language. So rather than even the word meditation, where others would say contemplative prayer, or others would say different things, we're constantly aware that using the New Thought jargon is not easily acceptable by everybody else.
Perfect. We do have to close up. Did Kathy join us again? All right. Well, thank you, Kathy. I hope you watched this replay. Each of us have been inspired by your teachings and the generosity of your spirit. And I'd like to close with a prayer. So if you will, join me in closing the outer eyes and tuning in and connecting with the one heart, the one love that we've all experienced here today with these inspiring, uplifting, new thoughts that Reverend Kathy has shared with us. I trust and know that each of us take away what has most inspired us and uplifted us and opened our minds and helped us to become more curious about who we're becoming, about seeing beyond the old paradigm of stretching ourselves beyond our previous beliefs, beyond our previous paradigms into what's truly possible. So as we integrate these teachings with ease and grace, I speak a blessing upon each of us, on the ANTN organization, on our beloved community. And so it's with a full and grateful heart that I say, and join me please. And so it is.